Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode here on GarageTech with me, Darren. This is episode 4 in this series reviewing the Porsche Cayman S. In this episode, I'll be taking you through the differences between the transmissions or the gearboxes from the first generation of Cayman, so that's the 987 with the manual and the auto, through to the third generation, the 981 with the manual and the PDK. Okay, so first off, what's actually fitted to what? The Generation 1 Cayman and the Boxster 987 were available with the 6-speed manual or the 5-speed Triptronic automatic. So this is the traditional automatic transmission with a torque converter. The Generation 2 987.2 and the Generation 3 981 were also available with the 6-speed manual, but the automatic was upgraded in 2009 for the Generation 2 to the PDK auto transmission. Now, PDK stands for Porsche Doppelkupplung or double clutch, which, if you know anything about these types of gearboxes, are the same design principles as the Volkswagen's DSG and the Audi S-Tronic. I'll take you through some more technical aspects of the PDK and how that works later in this video. So first, let's start with the manual and take a look at some of the gear ratios. But before we do, all three of these boxes are very similar in terms of their design. The Generation 3 having the most significant change with the thermal management system. And I'll take you through some more of the thermal management system information a bit later on in this video. I'll show the S and non-S variants here to compare, as there are some differences across the variants. So here we have the data for the Generation 1, Generation 2 and Generation 3 Cayman. Now, before we get into this, if you've done any research yourselves on gear ratios for these Porsches, you may find there is some conflicting data. This is the most accurate figures which I've been able to find, so you may find some different ones out there, but I find this is the most accurate because it goes down to 3 decimal places compared to some of the information which has been rounded up to 2. So looking at the 3 generations, the biggest change is between the Generation 1 and the Generation 2. Now the Generation 3, the 981, has the same ratios as the Generation 2, so there's no difference there. First to fourth gears on all 3 gearboxes in the Cayman S have the same ratio. The Generation 1 has a different ratio for 5th and 6th, with the 5th gear being slightly shorter and 6th slightly longer. Now the final drive on the Generation 1 is also different, with a shorter final drive. Now there's more to it than just a simple calculation, as you have to take into consideration the wheel size, etc. Now there are a number of different calculator tools you can use online to help you calculate the actual vehicle speed at certain RPMs in certain gears. So if you're interested in that, I've added a link to one in the description, so do go check that out if you're interested. So now let's take a look at the automatic or the PDK. As mentioned earlier, the Generation 1 has the traditional automatic transmission, which in my opinion, I would just stay away from if you're buying a sports car for driving pleasure. The PDKs are so much more refined. They feel a bit more like the manual, particularly when you're using the paddle shifts, and the response and just the driving pleasure of it is absolutely superb. So, you just put your foot down and away you go. Now comparing the ratios is a little bit difficult when comparing the Generation 1 with the PDKs, because the Gen 1s only have 5 gears compared to the PDKs with 7. So the Generation 1 has a kind of a wider spread and a higher final drive, which obviously then helps increase that acceleration. But as I said earlier, the Generation 2 and the 981 have the same ratios. Now just for comparison, we'll take a look at the manual compared to the PDK. Now obviously the PDK has the 7 gears over the manual 6, so it's difficult to compare, but obviously the final drives are different as well, and the PDK ratios are closer together. The manual gives you a slightly longer last 6th gear, which means you get a little bit more top speed. The PDKs have a slightly lower final drive, which gives you a bit lower torque and a higher top speed. But for example, the first gear is a higher ratio compared to the first gear of the manual, which means you get a higher torque. So as you can see, there is a slight difference between the two, but an even mix in the gear ratios. And ideally what you need to do here is go away and calculate each gear ratio for each individual gear. On paper and on the road, the PDK is quicker. It's not by much, but the gear change speed is that much faster on the PDK, faster than you're going to be able to achieve in a manual. You know, and obviously then you've got the closer spread of the gears. On both the Gen 2 and the 981, the PDKs have a quicker acceleration by about 0.1 to 0.2 of a second over the manual. Gen 1's 0 to 60 is 5.1 seconds in the manual and 5.8 in the auto. The Gen 2 S manual 0 to 60 is 4.9 and the PDK is 4.8. And the 981 manual is 4.7 seconds and the PDK is 4.6 or 4.4 with the sports chrono turned on. In the PDK you also get that extra 0.2 with the sports mode turned on due to the optimized gear change, where the PDK's lack is the top end speed. Both the Gen 2 and Gen 3 are about 1 mile an hour off the manual, but let's face it, how often are we going to be doing 170 miles an hour? In top speeds then, in the Gen 1 S, it's 171 miles an hour in the manual and 166 in the auto. It's quite a bit of difference. The Gen 2, 172 miles an hour in the manual and 171 miles an hour in the PDK. And the 981 is 175 miles an hour in the manual and 174 in the PDK. Now, these are all the manufactured quoted figures, so could be different in real life, especially if these cars have been modified anyway with bigger wheels, etc. So back to the PDK and how that actually works. Internally, they look very similar to a manual gearbox in terms of the helical cut gears and the synchronizers, so rather different to a traditional auto transmission. But as the name suggests, it has two clutches, which in this case are hydraulically operated. Clutch 1 controls the odd gears, so that's 1, 3, 5 and 7, and reverse, while clutch 2 engages the even gears, so that's 2, 4 and 6. These double clutch transmissions are now widely used and are renowned for obviously their speed in changing gears, and they kind of give you that computer game kind of feel with the flappy paddles, etc. So what makes these gearboxes so fast in shifting? Having two clutches is like having two gearboxes, as the name kind of suggests, and it switches from one to the other. So it already has the next gear already pre-engaged. So when you're in second, for example, third gear is already pre-engaged. So as clutch 1 then disengages, clutch 2 then engages, and away you go. So it happens in a matter of moments. So even the most skilled drivers can't change gears as quickly and as smoothly as what you can in these double clutch transmissions. Now, going down the gears is a little bit slower because these boxes usually have the higher gear pre-selected. So you generally find there is a very slight delay when downshifting when you're using the paddles. Onto some of the modifications from the 987.2 to the 981. The PDK has been modified from the Gen 2 to the 981, and the 981 includes the modifications which went into the 911's 991. So these included a coasting function. So when deaccelerating gently, neutral gear is selected, which is great for saving fuel. You can also select neutral via the paddle shifts. So by pressing the two paddle shifts together at the same time, the gearbox actually goes into neutral. The 981 has the integration of the start-stop system. But the biggest improvement is the thermal management system with the lubricating oil supply. So this means that the cooling system now can actually warm the gearbox up when it's cold, and it also cools it down when it gets hot. It has a temperature sensor built in to obviously aid all of that as well. And as I mentioned, it also has the integration of an oil pump now, which actually supplies the oil to the gears in the gearbox. We also have then the dynamic transmission mounts in conjunction with the Sports Chrono package, which is also available as an option. The wiring harness has been slightly modified, obviously due to the additional sensors, and the clutch pack itself, there was also some modifications to that. The 981 manual, so it's the G8120, upgrades include triple cone synchronizers with carbon coatings for synchronizations of first and second gear. Third to sixth retain the double cone synchronizers. The 981 manual also has the thermal management system on the transmission with the integrated oil pump as well, and the temperature sensor for the thermal management system, so the same as the PDK. You also have a neutral detection sensor fitted on the transmission for the start-stop system. It has the gear shift assist, which indicates on the instrument cluster the correct gear relevant to the vehicle's speed. It's not really a gearbox modification, as this is calculated by the engine control unit. I thought it's just worth a mention. And of course, we've also got the dynamic transmission mounts in conjunction with the Sports Chrono package. So the 981 also uses the intermediate throttle application function in conjunction with the manual. So this is the rev matching. So whilst you're downshifting, so whilst deaccelerating and going down gears, the engine actually revs up as you start to release the clutch, and this then matches the speed of the engine with the lower gear set. So it sounds really good. The 987 Gen 2 and the 981 was also available with a differential lock as an option, which has a lock-in value of 22% traction and 27% overrun. So that's it, guys. That wraps up my review on the transmissions on the Caymans. So it's a difficult choice if you're looking at the two between a manual and a PDK. I certainly recommend driving both, but whichever one you decide to go with, you're not going to be disappointed. For me personally, I'd PDK if you want to just do some normal sprinted driving, absolutely fine. If you want some more involved track work, then you probably want to look at the manual. In my next episode, I'll be taking a look at the differences between the Cayman S and the Cayman R 987.2. So if you're interested to find out more on that one, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, and as always, give this one a thumbs up and put any of your comments below. That's it, guys. Thanks for watching. Take care.